For this question number one, what I want to do is go through how you would answer this within Ableton. So really quickly, this is the unaltered audio, and this is what I've got my answer as. Notice how on this, I've already cut this up. This is hopefully how your answer will look. On this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through this and how I would answer this question. The question states that the drums are out of time for bars 22 to 30. So right there, just pause it here. And what I'm going to do in Ableton is I'm simply going to highlight where bar 22 to 30 is. Let me just zoom in a bit. And what you'll notice that here is bar 22. And I'm just going to highlight all the way here. Now, this is a very, very important note. Don't highlight to the start of bar 30. This includes the whole thing of 30. So once you've done that, now I'm going to loop this. All this is going to do, really, is it's going to give you a visual about where you need to start editing, where you need to start moving files around, and so on and so on. So with this in mind, I'm going to say one quick thing, which is this. Whenever you're editing any sort of audio, just make sure that if you're going to cut any audio, that you don't cut transients, because if you do, there's a high chance that you're going to get a glitch or some like pop, some sound that they're going to mark down. So again, when you cut this audio, make sure that you zoom in and make sure that you don't cut out any transients. In the first instance, can you see that these transients are all outside of that grid line? So in other words, my visual is going to back up the argument that all of this is out of time. Let me just give you an example of this. So in the previous bars, if you can see that all these transients here fall on those lines. And with this, if I zoom in any more, that you can see that these lines are going to line up with the transients. So within this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the audio from bar 22, and I'm going to cut it all the way up until the end of bar 30. So by doing this, it's really simple. All you have to do is just move it a little bit and then move it back. And what that will do is whatever you've highlighted, it will cut. So now that I've cut this, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to move this event or the individual beats to match up with the grid. So if you zoom in to this area, what you'll notice is that you have two of these transients. One of these is going to be your kick drum, and this is what is pushing all this out of time. So all I'm going to do is this. I'm going to move my event a little bit closer to that second transient. And again, what you could always do is listen to this on your headphones and hopefully understand that this is your kick drum and this is your snare drum. So with that event now edited back to that first transient, I'm just going to move this back to bar number 22. Notice how the transient is sort of now closer to that main bar 22. And again, zooming out a little bit more, you can see that the transients are now in this line. However, they're not perfect. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to zoom in and just give you an example of this. This is where 22.2 starts. However, that's where your transient is. So this shows me that my audio event hasn't been edited enough. So all you have to do within this is just keep editing this down. Notice how I'm zooming in, which will create more of those lines. I'm just going to keep editing this down until I'm roughly at that transient. As a reminder, whenever you edit any audio, you're not meant to cut the transient at all. Notice how that by default, Ableton will create this fade in. And what you can do with this is you can just move this around if you need to. So in other words, if I were to accidentally cut that transient, notice how there will be a fade in here, and you can use that to your advantage if necessary. So I'm just going to move this until I sort of get this in line, and you can see now that that transient as well as this transient are now in line. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to move through this, and you can now see that each one of those transients are on that grid line, and I'm just going to keep moving this around just to make sure that everything is now in time. And if you wanted to, you can turn on your metronome and you can listen to this with your headphones. So by moving this around, I'm looking at the transients and I can see that everything is now in time. Let me just zoom out a little bit. And the last thing is this. Notice how that this last bar here sort of goes on to almost the end of the bar, and I have a little bit of a gap here. So in other words, whatever this crash here is, that it's not going to have any noise on this, and also that the next part of this is going to be in time. Now that we've gone through the question, what I wanted to do is have a really quick look at the answer. Edexcel are going to give you 1 mark for making sure that all your drums are in time. They're going to make sure that there aren't any glitches or any changes in dynamics whatsoever. And they're going to give you 1 mark for this. They're also going to give you a mark that they've been edited and then that the symbol at the very end has not been cut off. Finally, notice how they want just those drums. In other words, they don't want any other instrument in there. Don't worry about any metronome settings at all.